sister will be the first person to admit that the biggest mistake she ever did in her entire life was to teach me to talk. She says it to me all the time. Because I was one of those kids, and you know what I'm talking about, who was always talking. Talk, 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 talk. And I didn't quite know when to stop. And I always hated to be told to be quiet. You know, because clearly I had something important to say, even if it wasn't important to anybody else. But you know, over the years, I've learned, like everyone else from the School of Hard Knocks, what is proper and what is improper. So for instance, if you're in the library and you start talking, the librarian is going to go, shh. It used to be that way. Or think about it. You're going on an elevator. And don't you hate when you're on the elevator, you're following all the proper order about, first off, who gets in first, where they stand, second person, third, fourth, it keeps going. People have studied this, but you keep quiet. You don't talk on the elevator. But no, there's always going to be one or two people who talk, and you sort of look at them and think, you know, there's other people on this elevator. You know, and I have to say, sadly, over the past several years, some people have been talking, and they've been talking and talking and talking and saying such absolutely stupid and ridiculous things, but people are afraid, for whatever reason, to say to them, it's not appropriate, go ahead and shut up. You know, we like to shut people down, especially if we do not like what they're saying, or heaven forbid, they're interrupting us. In today's gospel, we see that exact same thing. We have there Jesus coming from Jericho on his way to Jerusalem. In fact, if you read in your scripture, you'll see that after this passage, that's Jesus and Mark's triumphal entry into Jerusalem. So that's how far we are along in the journey in the Gospel of Mark. But on his way, there is a man, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus. Now, if you know anything about Hebrew, Bar is son of Timaeus. So Bartimaeus is son of Timaeus. Of course, I think the gospel writer knew that probably most of us didn't know Hebrew, so he just said Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus. But Bartimaeus was sitting outside and begging, because that's all he knew how to do, total blind. But like everyone else in Judea and Samaria and in outside of the area, everyone had heard about what Jesus did. Jesus did miracles. Jesus healed people. Healed people who were blind. Healed people who couldn't hear. Healed people who couldn't walk. Healed people who had mental illness. Healed people who had epilepsy. Jesus raised people from the dead. Jesus fed 5,000 people plus women and children. Jesus even turned water into wine. I mean, he was so popular that everyone knew who this guy was. He was the rock star of that time, and it would be the rock star of our day. And people told Bartimaeus, Jesus is coming, he's going to come along this way. And Bartimaeus was so frustrated about being blind and having to beg for everything. When he hears that Jesus is crossing, he yells out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And he's told, basically, to shut up. He's disturbing Jesus and everything that's happening. But that doesn't stop Bartimaeus. He yells even louder, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me! Jesus calls him to him and asks what he wants. He said to see again. And from that moment on, he could see. Now, most people will read that passage and they'll say, the miracle is that the guy who could not see could now see. And yes, that's a miracle. But I think there's a bigger miracle. And that's the miracle where Bartimaeus, who had no rights, he was the lowest of the low. That even though he was told to be quiet, and he was warned, he persisted. And he yelled even louder for Jesus to have mercy on him. He would not be quiet because he knew that this was the only chance that he might ever have to meet Jesus. It was the only chance he might have to see again. Now, in our culture, we are living in a time where I would say even 10 years ago, definitely 20 years ago, things that we are hearing people say, either say out loud or putting it in social media or are putting bumper stickers on their cars or vans. People who in the past would keep their wacky opinions to themselves now feel emboldened to share their thoughts with the world without any consequences whatsoever. And the more people hear these things, the more people who have mental illness, the more people who are radicalized will listen to these things and think, that's exactly what I've been thinking and I've been saying, and you know what? I'm not going to keep quiet anymore, and better yet, I'm going to do something about it. In this past week alone, we have seen pipe bombs being sent to 2 ex-presidents and an ex-vice president, along with other American citizens. We have seen an armed white man go and kill 2 unarmed black men at a grocery store simply because of the fact that he was racist. And just yesterday, on the Sabbath, the holiest day for Jews throughout the world, a man with a gun, an AR-15, went into the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, in the area exactly where Mr. Rogers was from. And he went and he killed 11 people who were there to pray to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and were there even for a naming ceremony of a baby. But because this man hated Jews so much, he could care less. And so while people were praying, he came in and shot them to death and injured so many others. Is this the type of world we're living in? Is this the type of world we want these children to grow up in? To think that these things are okay? As a Christian, as a priest who studies Scripture, who ponders often what God would like me to do, and also what God is asking us of a community to do. As the rector of this parish in particular, I cannot believe, I just can't believe that we are living in a time where there is such disrespect for the other and such hatred towards the other that some individuals will take up arms. And some individuals will yell from the top of the mountaintop about how evil people are. As a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, who was a Jew, who is a Jew, who knew that all humanity, all humans were made in the image and likeness of God and that they were good. That because of that, we are to love the Lord our God with all our heart, all our soul, all our mind, and we are to love our neighbor as ourselves. And I brought Mr. Rogers up. I grew up with Mr. Rogers. I learned more about respecting the dignity of every human being from Mr. Rogers than I think from anywhere else in my entire life. Because for Mr. Rogers, it didn't matter who the person was, what color they looked like, what ethnicity they were, what ability or disability they had, how rich or how poor they were. None of that mattered. You know, Mr. Rogers was a pastor himself. And he used what he believed from Scripture, and what I know from Scripture is true. My question for us today is we have a choice to make. We can sit on our tush, tape our mouth, tape our hands so we can't type anything, text anything, post anything. We can't say anything because we're so afraid about what somebody might say or think of us. Or we, as Americans, can live what our country was founded on. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men and women are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among them are life, liberty, freedom, and the pursuit of happiness. And that we, as Christians who know that Jesus himself was always pushing and pushing and pushing his disciples and everyone else to what? To go to the outcasts. To go to those who society often says are not important. The widows, the orphans, the blind, the lame, the deaf, those in prison, those homeless, those without food. It is what we do and we are trying to live at St. Jude with the Mission Center at St. Michael and All Angels, where we have a ministry specifically for mothers and babies and children who have absolutely no rights in society. We do that both at St. Michael and All Angels and here at St. Jude by hosting AA groups that most members of society would look at those individuals and say, oh, they're just drunk. We do it by hosting Episcopal, a support group for trans and gender identity, questioning young women and men. We do it every day here at St. Jude by loving anybody who comes through those doors. It does not matter about one's gender, about one's race, about one's sexual orientation or gender identity, about one's education. And the list goes on and on and on. It is time, my friends, for us as Christians to stand up with other religious leaders, and they are standing up. Our presiding bishop put out a video, which I'll share on Facebook, about what happened yesterday in Pittsburgh, and has put out other statements, has joined together with other religious leaders from all walks of life to denounce racism, to denounce homophobia, to denounce the oppression and erasing of the trans community, to denounce xenophobia, to denounce misogyny. We can do our part, and we can do it without having to kill somebody. We can do it without having to add ad hominem attacks. It's a speech term that's attacking the individual instead of having an argument against their policies. Mother Maxine and I might disagree about something, but we're not going to go to blows over it. We're going to sit and we're going to talk and we're going to work it out. Because that's what we do. That's what we were taught. That's how we were raised. That's what we thought the American dream is all about. So my friends, what are you going to do? Because really, it's up to you to make the difference in this world. As faith leaders, and you are leaders because you are here. It's time to stand up for what God knows is truth and what we know is truth. To speak the truth in love. To denounce acts of violence. To denounce hate speech. And instead, give people an option how to love. And who to love. If we do that, if we start doing that, then I have zero doubt that the kids that are in this congregation, this day, whether it be here, in our sanctuary, or in one of our Sunday school classes, that they won't learn from our stupid, bad behavior and politics and rhetoric. And that they're the ones, if we help, that can bring total peace, total love, total joy to God's kingdom. Will you join me?